Hello and welcome to the walkthrough of SPAD.next, the beta 0.5. I'll quick show what has changed, and a lot of things have changed and what's new. First of all the devices got a graphical update. Thanks to Darren for putting a lot of time in supplying me with graphics for all the stuff. Really great. As you can see in the devices line, the radio panel is supported now. I will show that in a bit. Just going through the changes. When you first start the beta 0.5 and have an old profile from a previous version, it will be automatically upgraded, and you get a notification that it has been upgraded, and you need to save it manually one time using the save button to get it upgraded. So let's remove that blinking stuff. So for the switch panel, not much has changed. It got graphics update. But I'll show what changed under the hood. The configuration dialogues for all events have been changed, but the BIP panel that has been stayed the same. But all other configuration dialogues have been overworked. Still the same. You press the right mouse button to get into the configuration. Then you have this new edit menu to copy, paste, cut, swap, or clear a setting, and you go into the configuration dialog. This now has been changed. As you can see, you see a list of the values or events you can configure for that switch or display, along with some icons. There's the gear for configuring the event. Then you can now add an additional event to one switch, so you can have 2 actions per switch. I'm gonna show that in a second. And of course you can trash bin all the settings. Nothing is changed to your profile until you click the save button. If we now go into the configure dialog, this has been changed as well. As before, you can select the action. What should happen if you press that switch, or if that event raises. You will see later about more events. There you have the offsets for standard PMDG planes. On a quick notice, if you use a PMDG plane, make sure to read the documentation of FSU IPC how to use it. There's some drawback with the events being lost if you switch to the PMDG from a different plane. Which reminds me to recommend that you update your FSU IPC to the latest version. Because we are using some of the new features. As you can see in the dialog, some new options are there. For the normal switches, it's FSX control, which means you can trigger a click on a control on FSX for stuff that you cannot do via offsets or anything else. And the virtual joystick button, I'm gonna show that in a second. For an offset, and in this case the master battery switch, you can configure 3 values or 3 settings. The first one is the value to set when the switch is pressed. Then you have a read-only checkbox, which comes into action if you have more than one event linked to something, so to make sure only one event is executing when you change the switch, you can set a setting to read only, so it will not send the event. And for offset values, you have this value normalizers. I'm gonna show that in a second when we come to the radio panel, what they do in general. But basically, it's for converting the values coming from the simulator to the software into human usable values. If we select an FSX control, I get a list of all the controls available. There are a lot of them, and I can select one and say, close ATC menu to this. The parameter is usually unused unless you have a get or set option. Please read the documentation of FSU IPC about how to use the parameter value. And if I use a virtual joystick button, of course I can select the joystick to send to FSU IPC and the button, and then I can simulate the click event to bind the button in FSU IPC. I can add an additional value to this, so it will duplicate it. I can configure it and say secondary should be sending a joystick control. So I can do 2 actions with 1 switch on the switch panel. Again, for a normal switch that has an on and off state, you only have this value on and value off. So for the multi-panel, it got an graphical overwork as well, thanks to Darren again. Not much has changed from the UI. So if I turn the selector, what happens is, what you can see is you have an orange button if it's off, you have a yellow button if it's on, and you have it in red if it's on via a long click, which shows a new option in the configuration dialog. You get, if you have a push button, you have a short click and a long click you can configure. In this case, it's configured to do nothing. But we set it to a joystick, save it. So that's the reverse button. We enable it and do a long click for it, and it turns red. And I'll turn it off because I didn't configure the off value. So if I change the altitude, you will notice the pitch trim will change automatically because the autopilot and the altitude is on. Notice a nice animation done by Darren. Very nice. For the backlit information panel, not much has changed. Some graphical reworks, and the previously hotspot for testing and turning all plates on off moved from the upper left screw to this test button, so you can see if it's on or off. In the configuration dialog itself, let's go here. Nothing changed. It's still the same. Now we come to the new stuff, the radio panel. It's a rather complicated device, and because of narrow hotspots for configuration, The configuration for the radio panel works a little bit different. Everything that can be configured is bound to the selector state. So there's only one configuration dialog wherever you click. It's always a COM1 for the upper half in this case, and the transponder for the lower half, because everything else is configured here. So if you want to change the configuration for ADF, you have to first turn the selector to ADF and then click on configure. And now with configuring on the radio panel, you see a lot of more options. Value on, you know already, it's usually unconfigured for the radio panel. Just configure it if you want an action to take place if the selector is switched to that value. Then we have the value off, which is usually unconfigured as well. Configure it if you want to have an action to take place if the selector is moved away from that value. Again, you can add more than one event to each sub-event. Then we have short click and long click. They refer to the active standby button on the right hand side. In this case, for the COM1, I've configured it to swap the controls. If I go inside, it's radio swap controls. Values 8 means that the COM1 frequency standby and active should be changed. And then I can configure the displays, the left hand display and the right hand display. Let's use the standby frequency, and this is where the value normalizers come into action. As you can read, the frequency comes from the simulator as a binary coded decimal, which is human unreadable, most in the cases, of course. Therefore, you have different normalizers. So a normalizer for COM frequencies, for navigation frequencies, then for the QNH in Pascal or inch, then a special normalizer if you wanna trigger the fuel percentages, then for transponder for the ADF, and meter to feed if you want to work with the altitude offsets. In this case, it's COM to frequency to automatically convert it to a frequency that you can read. And then you can bind the inner tuner clockwise and counterclockwise, and the outer tuner. There you get another option for the values for the selectable action. It's bind to value, which means you can bind it to another sub-event. And if you bind it to a value, you have to say where do you want to bind it, and I want the inner clockwise bind to the right display, which is the standby frequency. As you can see, all the 4 possibilities are right now bound to the right display. So let me pick my plane here so we can see something. We have our COM frequencies, as you can see, the same as here. And if I go ahead now and turn the inner dial, it will move in file and or in one per click. This is configurable via the inner dial configuration in the settings. Cannot show it yet because it's not done, but it will be done by the time the beta 0.5 will be available. which steps the tuner should take. And if I click on the active standby button, it will swap the frequencies. Did I configure a long click? Let me see. No, it's unconfigured in this case. So if I switch to COM2, this one is unconfigured, which turns the display dark, so you know it's unconfigured. Same goes for the navigation frequencies. It's configured likewise, just with the nav frequency normalizer. For the nav frequency, this is pre-configured. For all the standard configuration, I provide a default profile which you can copy to your normal profile. Again, I can turn the inner dial in 0.5 steps or the outer dial in 1 kilohertz. So then we have an F2, it's unconfigured, and the ADF, which you can see here, again standby and normal frequency, and again I can turn it in 0.10 or in 10 kilohertz steps. If I turn it to an invalid down below the maximum lowest value or maximum value, it will automatically warp over. Same goes for the DME. It's not configured here on my device. You can just grab the DME values from the offsets and have it displayed. And special case is in this case a transponder configuration. Here, so we have the left display in this case bound to the altimeter settings, and the right display to the transponder frequency. And you can here see I have bound the inner dial to the transponder frequency and the outer dial to the altimeter. And a short click on the active standby button will change the digit mark, and a long click will set the altimeter to standard pressure. So this is configured as a barometric standard pressure. Parameter 0 will set the parameter, will set it to standard. Parameter 2 will set it to the configured value. It's an FSX control in this case. So if I then turn the outer dial, it's moving up and down. And if I configure the display, you can see I have QNH in hectopascal, and I can change it, of course, to inch. Save it, and it will change the display to inches. And I can change the transponder frequency. The inner dial is in this case bound to it, and the little dot marks the digit that is changed. The dot is on the right hand side of the digit, so for the last one you won't see the dot on your display. So if I turn it, it will change transponder frequency, and if I click standby button, dot will move on, and now I'm on the last digit. So let me turn that back to hectopascal. Whoops, and if I do a long click now, it should, yeah, it's now to set to standard again. And I guess my pitch trim is working like hell, trying to compensate that. So What else changed is the handling of the default profile in preparation of the aircraft binding of profiles. It has been reworked, so there's a new file, SPAD.neXt.conf, where the default profile is held. So you can switch them here without any problems. And yeah, basically, did we change anything else? Let me see. You can create new profiles now, which means you give it a name, and it will then create a new profile for you, which you can activate. Upgraded, not upgraded one, that one. Yeah, we want to switch. Yes, we want to save. Okay, the device will not match. And now I got the information that the profile has been upgraded. In this case, I don't need to check it because I know it's okay. Anything else? What did I forget? Let me think. You can also configure the tuner settings for the multiplayer of multi-panel, of course. I think that's it. Not much more that changed. So from the plannings, this will be the last beta. I'm gonna care for all the housekeeping stuff now, like working with profiles, binding to aircrafts and stuff. As soon as that is done, this will be version 1.0 before move on to next devices. So have fun with playing around with it. You're welcome to join the forums to either give your feedback or suggestions or exchange your profiles with other users, or even grab the latest alphas or betas which are not officially released, just for testing versions, to see what's going on. Have fun and see you next time.